there folks, today I'd like to take a casual peek into the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Elrond of Rivendell action figure set by Toy Biz. This figure set is part of the Trilogy Edition line of Lord of the Rings action figures and was first released around 2004. I purchased this set at the end of 2011 when I saw a good deal on it off eBay, and I only paid $10, which included the shipping for this set. Taking a look at Elrond here in the packaging, you can see Hugo Weaving, who played Elrond in the movies, and I believe this version of Elrond never appeared in the original releases of the Lord of the Rings figures, the ones with the half-moon packaging. I could be wrong. I know there was an Elrond figure in the half-moon packaging which depicted Elrond in his Esquire armor during the battle at the end of the Second Age. But for this version of Elrond, I believe this is the first release of that figure in the Trilogy Edition, one with his robes when he was Master of Rivendell. And you can see Elrond here in his robes, which is very nice. And over here we have the back of the packaging with a description of Elrond of Rivendell. And no previews listed on here, or even features of the figure. Usually they have an artist rendition of the figure and some of the action features, but this has just the basic backdrop of the map of Middle-earth there. So it's kind of interesting to have no previews on this figure set. And you can see some of the copyright information right there in Toy Biz. Now we'll be right back and have Elrond out of the package. Okay, we're back and we have Elrond of Rivendell out of the package. And this is a very nice figure, despite the very restrictive nature of the posability of this figure, just due to the way the robes are sculpted. It's still a nice figure due to the very good sculpting, the detail, and even the likeness to the actor that portrays Elrond. And this particular figure does not come with any accessories whatsoever, just the figure itself. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that figure. But first, let's just do a size comparison, because it's very interesting in that this is a very tall elf. And just do a size comparisons with Strider here. You can see side by side, Elrond here is taller than Strider. I can't remember if that's the case in the movies. I think they're about the same height. But the figure here is taller than the Aragorn figure, which is interesting. Now, not all elves are supposed to be short. Elves do vary in height, so that's pretty cool that they have this particular elf here very taller and leaner. Now, taking a look at a closer view of Elrond here, you can see it's very detailed. And let me see if I can get it into focus there. There we go. And it's very, very nice. First up, I gotta mention the likeness to the actor that portrays Elrond in the movies, to Hugo Weaving, and it's actually pretty good. Very close to the actor that portrays Elrond. And although I do notice that they overdid it just in the lower lip chin area. I think they smidgen over stylized it there, but it's still, you can see the likeness to Hugo Weaving on there, very close, a lot closer than some of the other Lord of the Rings figures to their characters, and it's actually pretty nice. But looking at the head sculpt, you can see all this detail on this Elrond figure. I will start off with the hair. You can see the locks of hair on the sides. This is actually made of a very bendable plastic, and it's actually, I think, glued to the sides of the head there. And it's actually very nice. I'm afraid that I may snap it off if I move it around too much, so I don't want to do that. But it's very soft plastic, which is very cool. And you can see that Elrond wears a tiara or crown on his head, and that's sculpted into the head there. Very nice, I guess, metal work on there. Of course, it's not real metal, but it's just part of the sculpt. But you can see the designs weaving in and out with the silver paint that's applied around the head. Very cool, and even the hair itself is very nice. You can see sculpted strands of hair in the weaving pattern in portions of his hair. It's actually very cool, and you can see a braided portion of his hair that's actually part of the sculpt, but it's still very nice, and you can see it's tied at the end with the clasp. That's very nice. And you can see all the layers in the hair. Very, very cool. And of course, it's got these sculpted elven ears there. Very nice. One thing with my figure, though, there is a scuff mark right on the temple there, which is unfortunate, and I thought it was just a rub mark. But it's a really extreme rub mark where it's actually a scratch into the sculpt there. So I'm hoping I can paint that to cover it up a little bit. I can find some matching complexion there for the face to cover at least most of that up. But still, it's a very nice figure. Now, of course, typical of these Lord of the Rings figures, it's got lots of detail, and moving down from the head, you can see he wears these voluminous robes, which is very cool. And you can see, excuse me, the robe itself has detail on there. You can see the sculpt behind the hair, all this etched pattern in there and painted with a lighter red, which is very, very cool. Also along the sleeves and along, not the collar, but the edges of the robe there on the upper edge. Very, very nice. And this is actually a separate piece. It's made of a softer rubber, at least on the torso area. The arms, the robes on the arms are sculpted, but in the torso area, it's actually a separate soft piece of plastic similar to the hair. And it's actually glued to the torso, and underneath that robe you could see his jerkin. Very nicely detailed there as well. That's actually sculpted. Well, actually, no, it's not sculpted. It's actually glued in, from the robe to the jerkin, and that's actually made of a soft plastic as well. That sits on top of the torso. That's actually pretty nice. It's very soft in there, just like the robes. So that's actually pretty cool. And it's got paint on there. You can see the silver elven etchings there of his robe. So that's a nice surprise. I did not know that. I thought it was actually hard plastic, but it's actually soft plastic. So very, very cool. And that's one thing with the Lord of the Rings. They layer their figures with lots of detail on there. And looking at the arms here, you get the harder plastic of the sleeves here. It's actually quite nice. One thing, though, with the lower arms here, typical of the harder plastic, it does, you cannot bend this too much. It's soft enough to bend in there, but it's still pretty rigid, and it's got some nice detail here with the gold, very dull gold here to contrast with the brown. But one thing about the edges of these robes at the arms, if it's made of a hard plastic, it does make for awkward posability, especially when you outstretch the arms. How this is supposed to drape downwards, but because of the hard plastic, you move the arm out, the sculpt goes along with it. So you're kind of restricted on the posability of the arm, where it needs this to drape downwards there to look effective. Otherwise, it does look a bit awkward with those raised arms there, which is unfortunate. If they had made this to cloth or actual very supple type of material, might have fared better, but the longevity of that might have been in question. But looking at some more detail of the robes, you can see, I guess this wasn't a jerkin, it's actually an inner robe here. If you look down here, it's the same color as the upper portion here. And it's made of a soft plastic as well. Now this is actually a separate piece because of the articulation at the waist, so it's not all one robe piece. You can see the cloth I guess belt, and it's not really a belt, but you got the cloth piece to act as a sort of a belt, and this is actually where the two pieces of the upper and lower torso separate on there. So that's kind of interesting there. You can see the design work on the inner robe here, which is actually kind of nice. I got paint on the silver along the edges here, and what's kind of cool is there's even another layer of yet another inner, not robe, it's more of a covering for the legs, so made of a softer plastic as well. So you got 3 layers of clothing for this Elrond figure, and you barely ever see it when it's posed, but you got the leggings of Elrond here, and they even went to the details of sculpting boots, despite hardly ever seeing them when you pose the figure, which is very, very cool. You got the inner leggings here, of course made of hard plastic, and the boots as well. You can see some of the details sculpted into the boots. Very nicely done, which is typical of Toy Biz with their Lord of the Rings figures. Just lots of layers of detail. Very, very nice. Now, for articulation, it's very interesting. Knowing that these robes will restrict the articulation, they really put some added articulation in the places that they could. And starting off with the head. The head here sits on the neck, and the neck is got a separate piece of articulation, which is a bit of a surprise for me, because I did not know it at the time, but the head sits on a hinged swivel joint, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the hinge was pointed in this direction, and when I tried to pose it, the head, it only would move down at a weird angle, and I thought I almost broke the figure, but when lifting the head and looking at the neck, I noticed that it had a hinged joint that was pointing off to the left, to its left, and which is very interesting. So that is when I noticed that the neck had a separate articulation point altogether. But for this head that sits on top of the neck, it can go all the way around, and you just got to work with it very carefully, especially with the locks of hair at the sides here. You don't want to get it tangled up around the neck. And as I mentioned, the head sits on a hinged swivel joint, so you can bend the head downwards as well as upwards on there. So that's kind of cool. And the neck itself is on a swivel point at the base of the shoulder, so you can actually move that neck around. And if you hold the neck and move the head, you can articulate the head sideways as well. So pretty nice that they added that in there. They didn't have to do that, but they did. And I think they did that to compensate for the robe, which restricts a lot of the movement of the figure. But going over the rest of the articulation points at the arms can go all the way around at the shoulder area, as well as out and in, which is nice. The elbows do bend about that much forward and that much far back, and there's also a swivel at the just above the elbow there, so you can actually move that around as well, which is nice. That adds a little bit of posability side to side there. The hands are on a swivel point. They can go all the way around, but require a lot of work just due to the rigidness of this part of the robe. But you can get it all the way around. You just have to really work on it. There. The torso, there is no hinge at the ab area, but there is a swivel at the waist. So you can move the figure, if you wanted to, all the way around at the waist, which is below the outer robes and beginning at the inner part of the robes there. So that's kind of nice. And the legs, and I think they sculpted it simply just due to the robes, but the legs are on a basic T-type crotch articulation, so you really can only bend the leg forward and back at the hip, and you cannot bend it outwards. You cannot rotate it at the thigh or anything, and that's basically the only articulation at the upper leg. The knees do bend on a single hinge, and the feet bend at a single hinge. No swivel cut anywhere along the legs, and it's kind of understandable because you really don't need to pose Elrond that much. He's not gonna be jumping over hedges or orcs or anything. Not like the wood elf of of Legolas. He's a very, I guess not active elf as far as physical movements. So really very restricted due to the voluminous robes and just simple sculpt of the figure, which is understandable for this character. And so overall, it's a great figure. The detail, the sculpt, and the likeness to the actor is just very, very nice. And just a really great figure to have of the non-combative Elrond. Of course, you had the original release of him in armor, but this one is very nice if you wanted to have an older, wiser Elrond. This is my casual peek into the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, Elrond of Rivendell action figure from the Trilogy Edition. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.